All right, just like that, guys, I'm back. It's me, Tom Owens from the Tom Owens Show. Guys, I like to take the podcast out on the road. Today, I'm in a beautiful spot. I'm out here at Mooney's Grove Park in Visalia, California, and I got a special guest on today. A lot of you guys may recognize him from the UFC, from cornering guys like Chuck Liddell and Glover Texera, along with some of our local Central Valley MMA shows. You guys have seen this guy in the corners. John Hackleman, thank you very much for joining me. How you doing?
Hey, fantastic. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for taking the time out of your day, bro. I really appreciate it. It's always great for me to talk to people, old school people like you that have been in the martial arts pretty much your whole life, and get inside the mindset and just get tips and different things and, different opinions.
Yeah,
Um, how old are you now, brother?
64.
You're 64, and I know you started. I talked to you once before briefly when I was doing MMA Fight Pass podcast, but it was just real briefly. Um, so I was hoping to get a little more insight on your background. You're 64. How old were you when you very first started training martial arts?
10.
You were 10 years old, and were you living here in the United States at that time?
I was in Honolulu, Hawaii. That's where I grew up.
In Honolulu, Hawaii.
Yeah.
And so, what was the first style that you started training in?
Kaji Kembo.
Kaji Kimbo. So, is that your main background before you got into the MMA stuff?
100%. Yeah. I started with Kaji Kembo, which is a martial art that was developed in Honolulu, Hawaii in the early or mid 40s, right after World War II. And it was a system of, Kaji Kembo is karate, judo, jiu-jitsu, kempo, and boxing. And there was a mixture of street fighting techniques that these guys put together, in the mean streets of Honolulu, Hawaii, which is, it's a rough place. It's very rough, but they put their systems together and combined the karate with the judo, with the kempo, with the boxing, and all that, and they made this style called Kaji Kempo back in '47. They finished it and put it out, started teaching it. Now there's like tens of thousands of Kaji Kempo practitioners all around the world. And I changed my system to Hawaiian Kempo um, back in 1985 just because political reasons and technical reasons. And so I made that, I created, it's kind of hard to, what created? I don't know if I created it. I put it together back in 1985, and I called it Hawaiian Kempo, and I came up with the logo, and bang, we went from there. And then um, I was true to my Kaji Kempo roots, so we trained like them, which was really hardcore, especially the sparring and stuff. And I moved around, and I ended up in Arroyo Grande, California, which is the Central Coast. And I had a little gym in my backyard in LA when I was working there, and then I built one in my backyard here in Arroyo Grande, and just started training and teaching people like I always have. And then came Chuck Liddell, and it started from there.
Those guys in the today, when we go into martial arts schools, there's not too many just traditional martial arts schools now. It seems like in this area where I live, the majority of martial arts schools are all Brazilian jiu-jitsu schools. It seems to be like one of the most popular martial arts right now, BJJ, and parents, they put their children in BJJ. What do you think? I mean, you obviously look at it like as far as self-defense goes. You talked about Kaji Kempo. It's got a variety. It was meant for like self-defense and street fighting. What do you think about the training that goes on in a Brazilian jiu-jitsu class for a child when the parent they put them in there for a self-defense and they're just training Brazilian jiu-jitsu?
I mean, I think I think parents are parents. They have to, they want to do what's right by their kid, but they're going to do what their kid wants in the long run. They're not going to bring them somewhere if the kid's always complaining. And most parents grew up pretty soft in California in this era, and they never. I mean, probably 90% of the fathers have never been in a fight. You know, So they don't understand that aspect, even though it's there's more bullying than there's ever been, and there's more street attacks, um, or just as much as there's ever been. But if it doesn't affect you, then you don't really care that much about it. Like, I mean, to be honest, I don't really care that much about flood insurance in my house because my house has never flooded and I've never had a flood, so it's not in my mind. But but car insurance is very important to me because I've had car accidents and I've needed it. Right, medical insurance is very important to me because I've needed it. So self defense is kind of like insurance, and if you never needed it, you just don't really think about it much, and you don't really care about it, and that's a disservice to yourself, your wife, and your children. But I think jujitsu is kind of the modern day point karate. Because jujitsu is a Brazilian jiu-jitsu is a sport. It's a sport. Period. It's trained like a sport. It's taught like a sport. Um, you can use it in self-defense, but you can use baseball in self-defense too. Let a really good hitter have a baseball bat, or football. I mean, football can be a good martial art too. I mean, try to get a running tackle from some big strong guy, and you hit your head on the concrete. Fight's over. So you could be a boxer. You can go to a boxing school. That's great for self-defense, and it is a sport. But it is a sport. It is a sport. There are rules. So a street fight has no rules. So we put stuff together. We put we do. We have a triad, which is we have standing and we have ground. Now you have striking in both, but it's going to be either on the ground or standing. There's submissions on the bottom, submissions on the standing. There's striking on the bottom, striking on the top. Different positions and movement on both. Um, but if you adhere to a set of rules because it's a sport, that significantly shortens your bar or lowers your bar in how effective it's going to be in a real life street situation, which there are no rules, by the way. So, I mean, picking a singular sport, especially a one-dimensional sport like jiu-jitsu, you're not addressing takedowns, takedown defense, striking defense, or conditioning. And all those things mean everything in a street fight. So, and then point karate is the same. It's a sport, but it doesn't address the takedowns or the groundwork, etc. Boxing the same way. So if you want your child to learn a sport, jiu-jitsu is a good one. Fighting karate and kata, that's a really good sport too. So is boxing, so is football, basketball, soccer, tennis. They're all good sports, but if you want to train your kid or have your kid learn to be safe in the street or at least a schoolyard, then they should teach or send them to a school that addresses all of the subjects that they find in the street. Takedowns, takedown defense, slams, getting up off the bottom, so all that stuff should be put together in one self-defense, or it's a sport. And so it depends what you want to. Depends what your goal is for your kid. He can get a nice trophy or a medal if you did Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, or baseball or soccer. But that trophy or that medal doesn't translate very well when someone's trying to knock them unconscious that are playing by absolutely no rules.
And then, with martial arts and other things in life, second nature, when you do something so many times, it just becomes second nature. And I see children at jiu-jitsu tournaments, just as soon as the match begins or inside the class when we're training, they just pull guard, this jump to their butt and slide into the guy real quick. And I could just see that going wrong in so many ways with a child that's getting bullied maybe, and he thinks that he's going to defend himself and he just jumps to his butt and pulls guard. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, I mean, but it depends where they are. If they're in the schoolyard and it's grass, and the guy doesn't have any like power punching from the top, the bully, then I mean that could work. You could submit him, but that's not going to translate well in the street, especially on the concrete against a guy that's swinging at your face, or it might even be two guys. Guard is not a good, because schoolyard fights are a little different, not quite as violent and dangerous as a street fight for an adult or even a teenager in some cases. So it has its limitations. It has a lot of limitations. Um, there is a time and a place, and hey, if a jiu-jitsu guy, you know, gets your back and gets your neck, he'll be able to choke you out and win any street fight. But then you got to realize he depends on who he's fighting. He has to make up the distance. So that means defending against all strikes. He has to be able to do that. And then he has to make contact with the guy and then defend from whatever bites, gouges, knife wounds the guy gets out of. Then he has to be able to get him to the ground, which jiu-jitsu guys aren't really known for, their takedown abilities. I mean, they're better than a boxer probably, but nowhere close to a wrestler. So then once you get him on the ground, if he doesn't bite your face off or gouge your eyes or punch you in the face, if you get his back, boom, now you're golden. That's where the jiu-jitsu guy will win 99% of the time. And that takes, different, he has to go to, level 1, level 2, he has to get his back, but first he has to go to level 1, and that's get him to the ground. And before that, basically you got to go to level, just to even get to level 1, you got to get close enough to get a hold of him. So, there's just, I like jiu-jitsu as a sport. No, I don't. I like jiu-jitsu as the sport addition to MMA. I like what you can take out of it and turn into a street technique. You just have to, some things you just have to tweak a little bit, like boxing. You have to. And I like the sport part of it, that you're not getting punched in the face for kids. That's great. But it's a very limited art. So I like it as part of MMA, but I think as a standalone martial art is severely lacking, and I don't think it is a true martial art. I think there are martial art aspects of it, like football and boxing, but it is hardly a efficient group of movements that can help.
Are you
Can you
there?
hear me? Yeah, yeah.
I
So
can.
did you get what I just said?
I did. That's an excellent
Okay.
answer, bro. That's an excellent answer. That's what I was looking for. Now, the mixed martial arts. You've been around it since it very first started. These cage fights. Uh, it's been a long time. What have you seen really evolve since the beginning until now? What have you seen like a big difference change from the beginning that these guys are
Uh,
doing today?
I don't think much is different except for the fighters. The fighters are evolving more than any other sport and quicker because it's a newer sport. Like you don't see, like boxers haven't really evolved that much since I'd say since the 60s or the 50s. I think you know I'm sure there have if you're a boxer and you study boxing and you know the micros of it. But as a macro, boxing looks pretty much the same um, as it has since I'll say 1960. You know, that's a long time. MMA has like changed, like 100-fold in the last 10 years. I mean, it's like it's no, it's. I mean, if you look at it from 2006 to now, huge difference. Boxing identical, football identical, but this as a sport because it is so new has evolved just incrementally. It's unbelievable because as a martial arts instructor, um, And I've been lucky enough to dabble in the MMA as well. But as a martial, but my main thing is I'm a traditional martial arts instructor, and MMA has helped me more than more than anything, just because it's changing martial arts. And what we see that's going to work on the street, we can tell what's going to work on the street by watching it, what's going to work in the sport. You just, because there's very little things that are completely different. Almost every technique in MMA is efficient and effective in the street, and vice versa. There's a couple things, biting and gouging, etc., you have to take out of the street version of Hawaiian Kempo and take it out before you put it in MMA. And the same with MMA, there are some things that you got to tweak or take out before you move it into Hawaiian Kempo for the street. But that's the minority. That's like, I could probably 5 techniques can't be used interchangeably. The rest of them can, and that means that my martial art, is just growing like MMA, and I love it because it's been proven. So I can teach my guys a technique, and I can reference. Well, you saw how it worked when he did that technique in the UFC last week, right? Oh yeah, that's how it works. But in street, you're not going to get that. You're not going to go around practicing techniques in the street and then teaching them at your gym and go, yeah, I got a video of me knocking this little old lady out and with a left hook, and then doing a soccer kick to her head, and then a foot stomp to her face. And you see how that worked? Yeah, it worked great. Well, she's in the hospital, no big deal, but at least we got to practice our technique. You know what I mean? So we can't practice our stuff in the street. We're going to go to jail or get killed. But you can watch all the techniques you're learning in a martial arts school now. You can watch it being used in the octagon. And that's like, oh shit, that technique worked. Or oh shit, it didn't really work that well. It does. The guy does get caught when he drops his hand. That's what my coach has been telling me at the gym, at my martial arts gym. He always says, keep my hand up. And I never can really figure out why, but I just saw why, because when you dropped his hand, he got hit the left hook and he got knocked out. So it's a great teaching tool.
Yeah, another thing I wanted to, one of my favorite things that I used to love about uh, watching guys like Chuck Liddell.
Yeah.
Uh, I'm not sure if you taught him this or not, but back in the day, there was a technique that he would use in there, and he would catch a lot of people with. I'm probably doing it wrong, but during the fight, it looked like he would drop and throw like a straight towards the body, and they would drop. They would always instinctively drop their hand, and he would come over the top with
Yeah.
that. Is that a technique that you guys worked on?
Yeah. In fact, before I came down here, I was teaching one of my fighters. He actually lives here on the property, and
Uh huh.
um, we do a little private session on Wednesdays because that's his day off, training with the team. So we were working on that today because he's more of a wrestler. When you do that, when you go low and you're fighting a wrestler, you're thinking he's going to do a takedown. Okay, so you're not going to think, you're not really thinking he's going to hit you, because if he's doing a straight shot to the body, you're just probably going to parry it with or block it with your elbow or something. Who knows? But if the guy has it in his mind, the guy's a grappler, like my guy's a national wrestling champ and all that. So when he goes down, even though he's sticking his hand out to get more leverage for the overhand, the guy's gonna think, oh, he's taking a shot. And almost everybody likes to underhook from a shot in a cage, and it's the dumbest thing to do, because you're gonna get faked. And then as soon as someone sees you going for that, next time the wrestler goes like he's going to go to the ground, he's coming over from on top with an overhand. So that's always worked for. It works mainly, for once you instill fear in the guy that you're going to hit him to the body or you're going to take a shot. But if you give him that fear, then it usually opens up upstairs for a minute or a second, because his mind is like shot or body shot. So he just goes from here to there, and that's all you need when you're doing an overhand.
Oh yeah, man, and to a lot of people, I would show that, and they'd be like, "Oh, that's just him throwing just a wild punch." And I would always think, no, he's putting the guy's mind on something else, and you know what I mean, putting their mind on something else, and then he would come over and land that punch. Knock quite a few people out with it. Uh, do you use that same idea with other techniques too, like setting up kicks or setting up elbows or knees?
Not as much elbows and knees, but a lot of punches. Most of my combos, I do some feints with the legs and stuff, but almost all feints and combos are done with the hands because I mean you can't do really. Your combo kick is kind of bang, 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 so it's kind of three separate kicks. You could call it a combination because you put it in a specific order, but it usually breaks up the combo. To me, a combo is like pop, 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 pop. Once you pull the trigger on it, it's gone. But when you're doing kicks, if the guy step forward or backward or to the side, that combination you're doing now is just changed, and you can change a kick combination midstream because it's your legs and the weight distribution. So I don't even know if I answered your question.
Yeah, you did answer my question greatly right there. That's awesome, dude. Um, you know what, man? Just I like the reason I bring guys like you on is just so I can, you've been doing this way longer than me, and you've been doing it way longer than the guys that I work with. I work with a lot of younger fighters
Yeah.
and coaches that are younger also that are in the game, and everybody's seen it on TV and they're wanting to get in it. What tips do you give a guy? There's a lot of real young men and women that are they're seeing the sport, and I see them in the gym now, and the amateur productions are growing, and it's pretty
Yeah.
easy to get into an MMA fight nowadays. So I see a lot of young people doing it. What advice do you give a new guy or gal that's getting in there and they think this is going to be their life path, the MMA thing? What advice could you give a beginner as
A
far as the
coach
training
or
goes?
a fighter?
A fighter, a guy that's getting
Okay.
in there and he thinks this is gonna be his thing.
I mean, yeah. I mean, as for training, I mean, that'll probably be the most important decision you make, and everything else you do in life, including your career, fight career, is going to be um, greatly, you know, taken back or held back or advanced because of your choices. Some things, just have nothing to do with choices, if you're born with one arm, that's not your choice, but you'll never, it does greatly affect your fight career. Um, but for the other thing, the people that, the choices that they have that they can make and make a huge difference. Um, that's gonna start with where you train and how you train, and that's the first step in opening that door. you know and then comes you all of a sudden you open that door and you have a place. I was just thinking about this week because I was talking to some people, and I was, when I first started fighting, um, and if you don't pick a good place, a lot of times that's gonna, your choices are where you're going to end up in life. So you choose a bad place, and even if you had the skill to work to maybe make it in the top to the top, if you picked a good place, man, you're gonna have to live with that fucking excuse, that choice your whole life. And when you're my age, you look back at choices you made and how they turned out and influenced your life. And there's a lot of like, I should have done this, or I should have done that. But if fighting, which you think is your career and your life, like martial arts mine, um, for instance, I'll give you an example. I picked the best martial arts right off the bat. Kaja Kempo in Hawaii. Toughest martial art ever. I mean, look it up. I mean, and he was the toughest guy around in Hawaii. He was just this guy in and out of prison, but he had this reputation of being the toughest martial arts instructor ever. And I'm this little skinny kid with long blonde hair, and that's the first place I picked. So that shit was handed to me then. those are those choices right there. The best martial art from the toughest martial arts. And I took martial arts. I found a place and did martial arts because, I'm a little white kid in Hawaii, and I knew I was going to get heavily picked on when I hit junior high school. And so at the end of my um, elementary school, I knew I was smart enough to know that I needed to train martial arts. My parents didn't know. They didn't grow up in Hawaii. They moved me to Hawaii. They grew up in the mainland, so it didn't click with them, and because they're adults, it's not the same for adults. But I knew, I've already been there years, and I kept hearing stories about they call it intermediate school, but they call it middle school here. But I knew when I hit middle school, which was seventh grade, I knew shit was gonna hit the fan, and I knew people would start picking on me. I knew they hated, my colors. So I found a place, and that was my choice. I made a really good choice doing that. Because if I didn't do that, I would be sitting somewhere broke, in a fucking corner. I'd probably be wearing a dress or some shit like that. I'd be, I'd definitely probably be gay or something. I don't know. I'd be something different than I am. Nothing against gays. It's just, that's not the path I chose. But why did that even come out? I don't even know. But,
Well, if you
but
look at
anyway,
today's culture, if you look at today's culture,
yeah,
man, it's
I
pretty
know it's not
pretty
too.
common ground.
I'm not too far off. But I picked the greatest martial art and taught by the toughest guy in anywhere in Hawaii. That's for sure. And that was just instinct because I went into a couple different schools while I was looking for one. And when I walked into that one, I walked in the door. I go, "This is it. I'm going to be here for the rest of my life. I can tell." And I was. And so those choices I made helped me be more successful in other things. And then I became a fighter, and then I became a pro trainer. And none of those would have happened if I made some bad choices in my martial arts journey, you know? So when I started kickboxing, I picked the best in the world, the Jet Center with Benny the Jet, right?
Wow,
So boom, now I'm on his team. That was the best kickboxing team in the world. And I
wow.
was on it. So I made these great choices that if I was better, I would have been like Benny. I would have been that good, or as good as Pete Sugarfoot Cunningham. I would have been that good. But I made it pretty high. I won a world title. I was kind of like, like if you watch UFC, there's some guys that win the title, but they never really make it like Chuck, huge. Like make it like Chuck or John Jones or
Right.
so I made it as a world champion, but I wasn't great like these other guys. I was just really good, and I was in the right place at the right time. So I made it much higher than I would have if I picked some substandard little, neighborhood kickboxing gym. I never would have made it as far as I did. So I made it as
Benny the
far.
Jet.
Yeah.
Um,
So
Dude, a lot of people. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. A lot of people
yeah,
don't know who Benny the Jet was. He was one of the best kickboxers in the world.
indeed.
Correct? Can you talk about him a little bit?
Yeah, Benny the Jet he's a judo black belt. He wrestled in high school. So he knew everything, but he focused on kickboxing. Basically Hawaiian Kempo, and then used kickboxing was his main. This is before MMA, and he went to Japan and fought against them using leg kicks, which most guys stateside were doing kickboxing, PK, but they didn't like leg kicks because that would destroy them. So Benny went WKA, which was a different organization, and that's the one I joined. Instead of Pete Sugarfoot Cunningham, but Benny went to Japan and fought them using leg kicks, because most Americans that fought Asians like Japanese and Thai, um, they could beat them standing, but then as soon as those guys started kicking the Americans' legs, they had no clue what to do. But Benny was the first one that went over there and fought them at their own rules and still beat them. And he just became, famous for doing that. And he was a world champion many times over. I think he was the best kickboxer that ever lived. And he had a team, and it was called the Jet Center. And I was on his team. I never got anywhere near what he was as a fighter or as a martial artist technically, but I being there, I was around the best, so it propelled me a little farther.
Yeah, you definitely gained something from it. Now, going even further back in history, Benny the Jet. Do you know anything about his origins? Like, who were his masters?
His instructor was a guy named Bill Ryasaki, which is in my lineage as well, from because he's from Hawaii, and he did Kaji Kempo as well. But then he came over and did Ryo Dojo Kempo with an N, and when I came over here, I made Hawaiian Kempo with an M. So we've kind of been on similar trajectories, um, but there's a lot of differences. And he was Benny's instructor. He was Cecil Peoples' instructor. So he had a couple of world champions under his belt, just like I did. Chuck Liddell, Glover Teixeira. But he had champions in the kickboxing realm. My champions were more the MMA realm. But
Cool, man.
that was Benny's main instructor since Benny was a kid. And his name was Bill Rasaki, and he's from Hawaii, just like I am.
Yeah, Hawaiians, they seem like they're tough people.
Yeah,
Hey,
he
how
moved to California too. So that's where he started training Benny. He went from Hawaii to California because he wanted to be an actor. I came over here because I wanted to be a fighter.
That's cool. That is really, really cool, man. Hey, how would have somebody, providing the time was right, like Benny, have done in like UFC one?
I think with Benny's minimal um, grappling skills, which he had coming
Uh,
in, I think if he worked on those and with the striking excellence he already had, I think he would have been unstoppable. And his heart, I mean, he was a fighter. He'd fight fucking anyone, and he won of his he actually won one of his fights with a body slam because it was illegal. So he got disqualified, but he actually knocked the guy out with it.
oh
So
wow.
yeah, it was a kickboxing match. I think it was a Thai guy or a Japanese guy, but he got in, got a hip throw in, and just elevated it and landed on top of the guy with a hip throw. You could probably find it on Google or something. But
Yeah,
that's
I'm
yeah.
gonna. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna look up some of. I'm sure Benny. There's probably a lot of footage of him out there. I'm gonna
Oh
have to
shit,
look it up
yeah,
because I haven't really seen any. I just heard about him.
yeah,
Now, did you watch this the UFC the other night? The last recent
yeah,
UFC.
yeah.
Hey, you follow the UFC. What do you think about the this is kind of offbeat, but how they incorporated the technology into the game, like that the arena that they were in, and how they used the whole. Were you tripping out on that? Was that a trip to you?
Yeah, I mean, it looked like Vegas. It looked like they had. I mean, they've had a lot of shows like that Blue Man show, and on all those shows, when you
Uh
go into the arena to watch Circus Olays, when they show the little, it's like a scene of a story. Then they get into the acrobatics of it. But there's that exact same stuff. So, um, to be honest, it was great. It was to another level, a little higher, but not that far off from what I see, or that like the rainforest uh, restaurant. And there's I don't know. It looked like Vegas, but I wasn't as I it's it was really cool to watch on the TV, but being there, I assume it would be like going to a Circus Soleil. So
right.
you know, I wasn't, and since the fights weren't great, that kind of brought it down a few notches. So I wasn't as crazy about it as everyone else, but I love Vegas. I love those kind of shows. I go to them all the time. I've been to Jabberwocky 3 times, um, but I love those kind of shows, and I love Vegas. I love the lights and the stuff like that. But I didn't think it was
What is
as
that? You said you've been to three times.
Jabberwockies.
Oh, pretty cool or what?
The Jabberwockies, oh, they're my favorite. If I go, they're at the. Oh man, I think they're still there. But they were at the MGM when I went, and they have their own little studio, and it's just a lot of pop locking and dance. I love dancing, and
Oh, yeah, me too.
they're really good dancers, and that's Jabberwocky. But and that's my point. My point is just it just looked like Vegas and the UFC. I didn't think it was a. I just thought it was a really cool show, but lights. It was like screens and lights.
Yeah.
So that's it.
Now, yeah. Um, in your time, you've seen technology change quite a bit. Like, I mean, so I'm getting ready to turn 50, but I've seen the technology change. And now we're living in a world where it seems like everywhere I look, the person is just looking down at their phone, and
Yeah.
they're just walking through life with their head down, looking down at the phone. What do you think about the way that the technology has changed in your lifetime, and where do you see it going?
I
You
don't see
trip out on it at all?
yeah, when you think about it, like, because I used to have to, even, I used to pull, I have to pull my car, I was like on the freeway. You'd have to pull over, pull off the freeway, find a side street, and then once you get a side street, you start looking for a payphone because you need to have a payphone. You better have a quarter because if you don't have a quarter, you're not gonna, you can't make the call. So it's like this whole. Then all of a sudden now you just press a button and hey Siri, call Heather, and boom, next thing you know, my wife's on the phone. So it is crazy, and um, I love that. I love that part. And you can do everything from the phone. It is crazy. You can learn martial arts online. Yeah, it's crazy, and that's one reason I like. I love the just the lights and the I don't know. Vegas has caught me since my first fight in Vegas. My first fight in Vegas, I was in high school, and it was like the Golden Gloves quarter regionals. So I won the state, and then you got to go to regionals, then you win the nationals. So the regionals were in Vegas. So I'm like 15 years old, for the Golden Gloves, and I think I was 16. Um, but I went to Vegas for the fight. We all went. The team went from Hawaii. It was like it was fun. I
Yeah,
just loved. I got addicted like right off the bat. I think all fights should be in Vegas.
it is a good spot for them, that's for sure.
Yeah.
I'm the same way, man. I love Vegas, dude. That's awesome, man. Well, dude, I really appreciate your time, dude.
Hey, no problem,
Getting the
brother.
pick. Yeah, I appreciate your time, and I'll talk to you again in the future. But hey, I want to thank you, man, for always like on Instagram and social media, mainly Instagram. I see your post, but
Yeah.
I appreciate you for putting out your tips from time to time and
Oh,
anything
thanks.
that you have to say. And I want to thank you for what you've done with the martial arts world. You've contributed quite a bit, and to the old school stuff, man. You're always going to be in my mind with that stuff. So thank you very much for coming on the show, John. I wish you the best in your
Thank
future,
you.
and I hope everything goes good for you.
You too,
And
brother.
yeah, dude, thank you, man. I'll talk to you again in the future. Enjoy
Bye,
the rest of
brother.
your day, my friend.
All right. God bless.
Tom Owen Show out.